So I've just returned my Sony Xperia 1 Mark VI after just over 3 months of use, and it might even be a full farewell to Xperia altogether. And that's quite difficult because it's a brand that I've been using now for just over 4 years, a brand that I really like using. So we're going to just talk about that a little bit. So I started using Sony Xperias with the 5 Mark II just over 4 years ago. The thing that really drew me in initially was the fact that it wasn't doing things the same as other phone companies. They were offering pro controls, headphone jacks, micro SD cards, a different aspect ratio for the screen, various pro features that other devices just didn't have. So it was a very specific tool set. And I thought this was great for creating videos, and doing any general content creation stuff was quite handy for. But I also quite liked using it as a phone. There were some aspects that were just little annoying things compared to the phone, such as the flashlight being really weak, or the haptic motor not being quite as nice. Just things like that just sort of made it a little bit frustrating at times and made me want to use other devices. But I always found myself going back to Xperia. So in this 4-year period, I've sort of gone to and from Xperia. But I always got drawn back in. It could happen again, don't get me wrong. But the thing that's different with the Xperia 1 Mark VI this time around is that they made some changes. So something that you could spot quite easily with Xperias the last few years is that 21:9 screen, and the fact that you had all these controls, professional controls for the camera, for photography and videography. Didn't always necessarily have the best camera hardware, but it did the job. With the Xperia 1 Mark VI, I was expecting changes. I was also expecting some improvements in the camera hardware. The most noticeable change that you have initially is the screen and aspect ratios change. So it's gone more towards how other phones are. We've moved away from the 21:9 skinny tall phones, and now it's a little bit wider, a little bit more like other phones, like your Samsung Galaxies, etc. And we've downgraded from 4K screens to 1080p screen. Not a problem, it ran in 1080p most of the time anyway. And the new panel in the Xperia 1 Mark VI is actually super efficient, and the battery life on the phone is insane, still with that 5000 mAh battery. It's the other changes or lack of changes as well that has really bugged me. So with getting into mobile photography a lot more in the last couple of years, I've started to appreciate telephotos more. The Xperia 1 Mark VI had a slight upgrade to the telephoto in that it gave you a longer focal length. So you got more of a focal range. So you could go from 3.5x to 7.1x optically. Whereas on the previous 2 generations, it was 3.5 to 5.2. That hardware, the sensor itself, hasn't changed. So it's 3rd year running of that sensor being the same. It's tiny. It's not good at all. It's really difficult when you use other phones that have bigger telephoto sensors. I mean, even the phone that I've replaced the Xperia 1 Mark VI with, which is the Honor Magic V3, the telephoto on this is enormous compared to the one in the Sony Xperia, and this is in a foldable. So there's literally no reason why they shouldn't upgrade that lens and that sensor. They just didn't. So it was already lagging behind last year. This year it's almost an abomination. I wasn't enjoying using the phone for photography. But then you think, okay, well, it's fine because I wanted to use it for YouTube and recording B-roll and all that sort of thing. But then the problem is that they've decided to dumb down the apps as well. So instead of having the photography app and a videography pro app and then your cinematography pro app, this year the Xperia 1 Mark VI launched with one app, just the one. And it's missing the majority of those features from, say, the videography pro and the cinematography pro app. At the same time, they've changed the UI, so it's now a little bit more like other phones. It's not got that distinct sort of Sony Alpha feel to it. And that's really been disappointing to me, because I actually thought that the user interface for that was better. Once you actually got used to using it, it was better. The layout was better. It was easier to see what you could change, what you couldn't change. It was more practical. They've got rid of that. And actually now it's an impractical mess, in my opinion. You can switch to a Pro mode still in there, but it's still the same sort of layout. It's very easy to knock certain settings or switch the mode or whatever totally by accident. That wasn't a thing before. And it's disappointing to see Sony go down that route where they're trying to appeal maybe to what they would deem as people that aren't as camera-centric, even though people buying Xperias generally are quite camera-centric people. If they're not, there was still a basic mode that was perfectly fine. So it baffles me as to why they've decided to go this route, because we know with all companies, when you try to appeal to more people, when you're trying to appeal to a larger group of people, it's very easy to neglect those that are propping up your brand. Now, if they hadn't changed that in particular, I probably would have stuck with the Xperia 1 Mark 6. But I have to say the camera app bugged the hell out of me. And by the way, those features are being added back in from the Videography Pro app. I don't even know if the Cinematography Pro stuff's being added back in, but at some point in the next couple of months, they are supposed to be added back in with the Android 15 update. I have no idea how that's going to look. I think it's going to be a horrible mishmash. I actually think having those separate apps made perfect sense. So we'll see how that end product looks, but there was just certain things that weren't very functional. There's a clip from, and somebody mentioned it actually in the comments of my last Xperia video where I went out with the Xperia recording stuff, taking photos. I'll pop it up above. There's a part in that video where I'm on the field using the vlog monitor with the phone, talking to camera. I'm using S-Cinetone. And the thing with S-Cinetone is if you don't make sure that the exposure is correct, it can look very blown out, and that's what happened. Now, I didn't even think about the exposure because you need to tap the screen to then adjust the slider, which is how you do it on a lot of phones now. I'm pretty sure before in the Videography Pro app, there was a toggle there for the exposure. You could see it, along with a myriad of other things. But because it wasn't there, I missed it. You could say that's just down to me, just not making sure I've set things right to start with, but it's nice when you've got that visual cue where you can actually see what you need to do. So it's little things like that that just made the Xperia 1 Mark 6 just a bit of an annoying experience. When it comes to being an actual phone, it's fantastic. In fact, it's the best Xperia as a phone yet. People buying it just for to have as a phone and not really too bothered about the camera side of things, if they're not too camera-centric, as few as those people will be, although I do know a couple of people that buy it for that reason, they will probably absolutely love it way more than the Xperia 1 Mark 5 because the battery life is incredible. It's incredible. And the build, in terms of the frame, the groove sides, the finish on the back, it's one of the nicest phones in hand that I've experienced. So Sony have got some things right with this change this year, but they've also sort of gone backwards in some regards. Now, if they'd have kept the apps exactly the same as last year and just maybe improved them a bit, if they'd had improved the telephoto sensor, didn't need to be a massive improvement. They could have just increased the size, maybe gone for one of the lighter sensors, like the 600. Like that would have been a meaningful upgrade enough to say this phone is nigh on the perfect Xperia. Whereas now, it feels like Xperia's just lost its brand identity. And I think that's what Sony's not realised, is that actually these changes are really damaging to the brand. I've seen a lot of people that really are still not happy with the phone. It sucks to see. It just sucks to see because it was one of the most unique options in the phone space. And if you are a content creator, the Xperia is such a useful tool. Being able to plug in microphones with the headphone jack, the vlog monitor, super useful. You know, you didn't need to get an additional camera, you could just use the phone and it would be way more practical. So it's a shame to see it go down the route it has. Will it be the end of Xperia soon? it's difficult to say. I mean, they've pulled out of some markets. The Xperia 1 Mark 6 isn't even available in the US. I've mentioned this in previous videos. Yeah, it's a difficult route. We've got no Xperia 5 model this year. So I'm not really sure what the strategy is. I know Sony have already signed up with Snapdragon to have Snapdragon chips for the next few years. Would it be better for them to just pay that anyway and just cancel the brand? I don't know. But I kind of feel like whoever's running the phone division, they need to run it more like part of the camera division. That's what they need to do. I know we've got slightly better on updates and things this year, and I think it's fine as it is. But they need to run it like they run the cameras. They need to class it as being another camera product as part of the Sony Alpha division, and just make it a tool for those people. Because I think it could actually work. I think it could actually work as a sort of a phone option of like a ZV E10 sort of thing. Like, you know, if you wanted something more compact that gives you all these features for content creation, it's there as an option. I'm sure people will have opinions on that. Yeah, it's kind of sad. I really like using Xperia, and I'm really tempted to go back to the 1 Mark 5 because that feels like the last true Xperia. Just so I've got those camera apps. The camera hardware is the same anyway. It's got an 8 Gen 2, which is fantastic. The build is very similar. I'm not really missing out on anything. Sure, battery life's not quite as good, but it was still very good. So, yeah, that's it. That's my feelings on the Xperia 1 Mark 6 after 3 months of use. It's not a review per se. I should have done a review, but to be honest, for the stuff that I wanted to review it for, I've not really been enjoying it that much, and time has been limited. So this will have to do. But maybe we'll review the 1 Mark 5 in the next few months and sort of compare and contrast. But anyway, that's me for this one. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Stay grounded. I'll see you in the next one.